The books of Kings and Chronicles describe how the people of Israel broke their covenant with God. Is there still hope for them? Today we have a guest, Dr. Efraín Velázquez. He is the Vice President of the Inter-American Adventist Theological Seminary. So, get your Bibles, get a notebook, and join the conversation. Efraín, we're very glad to have you here again.
Thanks for having me here in this exciting adventure.
Well, this is the second program we do on the historical books. Today we're going to talk about the books, from the books of Kings to the books of Esther. So tell us two things about this second part. How much time does these books cover? The other question that I want to ask is, what about the historical reliability of these books?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we have the longest period. We have about 900 years.
Wow.
And we're covering them in half an hour. The first one we did 500 years approximately, and now we're doing the rest. And it's not fair because, you know, the guy who did Acts or the Gospels with 3 years, he gets half an hour.
Yes.
But I will try my best. And it is fascinating because it's a lot of history, a lot of details. And many times people, when they study the history of salvation, they treat the Bible as an artifact, actually a curated artifact.
What do you mean by that?
That it has been edited, changed, developed through time. Because according to most critical scholars, the Bible is just the product of different sources that came through time.
So there was a process, it is said then that there is a process in which different stories, different documents were merged into one document, which is what we have today.
These theories on sources, they try to identify the different schools or different authors that they put together the Bible. However, that has lost a lot of impetus and a lot of support. And that's why today most scholars, they will focus on a canonical reading or even narrative theology. But this narrative theology, most of the times, are devoid of historicity because it's just a book, a nice novel, but not historical, and it's as the other myths of the ancient Near East. However, the Bible is different. And we can argue of the particularity of the Hebrew Scriptures and the historiography that we find in the Bible. For example, in these cultures, you have cycles.
Cycles, okay.
And it's cyclical. And you have this balance between good and evil. But in the Bible, it's not so. We have a linear view. And in the theodicy of the Bible, there's a problem because you then have an evil God to blame. God, Yahweh, is responsible for the good and the bad.
Now, what do you mean by theodicy? You mentioned this word. What is the meaning of that?
Theodicy is this quest for the justice of God, or to justify God. God is seated in the seat of the accused, in the bench of the accused. And now we are going to evaluate that. And we see that in the Bible. You have prophets and you have some of the writers, even in the historical books, even though they don't do it in the same way as the psalmist or the prophets. But it's the question, is God fair? And in the historicity of the Bible, you see that, that the descriptions are not flamboyant or sanitized. You have in the north, coup d'etat after coup d'etat. You have all these, the localization of the capital city of Israel. You have treason. You have the pitfalls of each of them. And you see that there's not such an emphasis as today on the good deeds of the people or of the kings. Omri has just a few words in the Hebrew Bible. But in the Assyrian records, we have evidence of Omri.
Yes.
And it was a great king. And we have evidence of Hezekiah. We have evidence of other Jezebel. And these people that appear in the Bible, we have evidence outside the Bible.
What do you mean by evidence?
Evidence mentioned in Stela, mentioned in Annals, the siege of Lachish. We have annals. We have actually pictures. We have a picture of Jehu, the Hebrew king. So we have also their works, like the tunnel on Hezekiah's tunnel, and we have also the cities. But history is different from other cultures, and even from today. In the modernist view, after Kepler, Galileo, Descartes, Spinoza, and Kant, you have this cause and effect. You want to be objective. But objectivity, it's not real. Even today, as postmodernists will claim, there's no way to see if that happened or didn't happen, and we ask for the motives of who wrote the story. So we're analyzing the writers of the story. But biblical historiography is both. It's historically reliable and it's relevant for today. The book of Kings and Chronicles, they present the consequences of breaking the covenant as a nation and how it affected the lives of who were listening. Yahweh is in control.
So this is very interesting because it seems to me that in portraying the evil deeds, the coup d'etats, and all of these things, they focus as well on the bad things that happened. So this is not, as you say, that sanitized. Now, do you mean that other historical works in the past did not contain these things?
No. Egyptians, they only have victories. They only have good deeds. The Babylonians and so on. And they are sparse. Even in their own cultures, they have contrary tales. But in the Hebrew Bible, we have continuity. And we have this same line, this plot, this storyline that fulfills, as you are going to see later in the New Testament.
Now, Efraín, let's talk about the Book of Kings. What can you tell us about the message of the Book of Kings?
Actually, it's the book, not the books. Because before, it was only a single book.
Yes.
It's after the Septuagint, after the Greek version of the Hebrew Bible, that then we have this division of two books. And as I mentioned before, this is part of the earlier prophets. So this is kind of complicated because this is supposed to be part of this corpus of Joshua to Kings. It's not part of what we're going to see in the rest of this program. This is part of the first prophets. It's prophetic in nature, their authors, their intent, and we can see it somehow as a unit, and it's called the Deuteronomistic theology.
Why are they called Deuteronomistic theology?
Well, there are two reasons. One reason is after Wellhausen, you have the source theory. You have the Yahweh's, Elohis, the priestly, and the Deuteronomistic source. So he claims that different authors or schools, they
had different theologies.
Different theologies, and they stitched together later, an editor, all these different sources. And there's another view. It was promoted by Martin Noth, and he spoke about this Deuteronomistic theology that it came the version from the north, the Ephraimites. The Ephraimites in the north, the northern kingdom, had a different view from the southern kingdom. And these two interpretations of history clashed according to him. And many people buy into that, and they followed that interpretation of history of the Hebrew text. However, today we don't have support of neither of those two theories. I still, it's a loaded term, but I still use the Deuteronomistic view because it's very, it has a lot of connections with the covenant and the curses and blessings of the book of Deuteronomy. So in fact, it's useful. We see this lawsuit, this rib, and the consequences of not fulfilling the covenant. And before, you had the book of Judges and the book of Joshua. Joshua being blessed and Judges being cursed. And you have from slavery to tribal federation to a king. Now you have from a kingship, you have all the way down to slavery. Again. So in the book of Kings, we have something similar to what we have with the book of Judges. because we have the problems that they had at the beginning of not being faithful. Unfaithfulness to the covenant has these consequences. Who wrote it? Well, you have perhaps, according to tradition, Jeremiah. Jeremiah is writing to the exiles, to the people who are going down to Babylon, the ones who are at the rivers of Babylon. And he's addressing why, again, theodicy, the question why there's pain, why there's evil. And he has these arguments with God. I have had these arguments with God. Why there's pain. And this is the answer.
So what Jeremiah will be saying is, look, we broke the covenant, therefore all these things have happened to us. And the implicit message would be, if we are faithful to the covenant, we would reap the benefits of the covenant.
We said before, Judges, Israel fails to Sinai. Now in Kings, the kings fail to the Davidic covenant. So it's a pattern there. Kings is also this theodicy, as I said. It's the plan of salvation to redeem humanity that was obstructed by unfaithfulness. And now he wants to give them hope in the midst of this catastrophe.
This is very interesting. Now, this may help us understand another question that I have. The book of Kings and the book of Chronicles, both of them cover the same period of time. Why do we have two works to cover the same period of time?
Well, you people from the New Testament, you have 4 Gospels.
Yes,
so
we
you're
have
complaining,
4, yes,
you know.
yes, yes.
So now we have different views of the same period of history. And now, instead of seeing it to the exiles, the book of Chronicles, it's seen from the other side, to the ones who are the returnees. And it's a message, a retelling to the returnees. However, these are the 2 bookends. And right now, in the Christian canon, it's problematic because you see Samuel, Kings, the same stuff.
Yes.
No, it's not the same. In the original, it was at the end. So these are the 2 bookends. The end, it finishes with Chronicles. And Chronicles, you see that he goes back to Adam at the beginning. So he will see the history, and the emphasis is different. Before, in the book of Kings, you have a lot of emphasis on the bad things that the kings did, and the David and his fall, and the deeds that he had as a warrior. You don't have that in Chronicles. You have in Chronicles an emphasis on the priests, not the prophets and the kings. You have an emphasis on the temple. You have an emphasis on restoration. So there are 2 different views and 2 different grids on how they view the past and how they are going to satisfy the needs of the audiences that they are giving this message. So
they are probably 2 different genres in some sense. One is prophetic, Kings, and then the other one belongs to the writings that we're going to study later on.
That's right. So before we had the first historical account, if you will, before Herodotus and the Greeks.
Yes.
You have history. And then here we have a midrash, or an interpretation. So he's going back. And that's why he finishes his book with the restoration, because this is the hope that he wants to carry on through his writings.
Now let's talk about the books of Chronicles. What is the message of these books?
Again, it's the book of Chronicles.
Again.
We have them divided by the Greek version, the Septuagint, but it was one book, and it's a book about restoration. It's a book that is written almost 100 years, actually, a little more than 100 years than the book that we had before, the book of Kings. It was done by Jeremiah to the people who went to the exile, and now we have this chronicler that people try to think about who's that chronicler. But we have the tradition that identifies him as Ezra. And Ezra is giving encouragement to the people that are now rebuilding the nation. And this is perhaps one of the most obscure and confused periods of biblical history. Many scholars, they end their history with Cyrus, and when he enters Babylon. Then there's a gap until Jesus of Nazareth. They don't know anything about that portion between,
Yes.
especially the Persian period. And I take that personally.
Yeah, because you have focused on that period of history.
That's right. That's my period, those dark ages. And in fact, we have little archaeological remains and even textual remains from that period. So that's why it's different to assess. But Chronicles, it gives us a sense of hope. And we see a different view of history. And now, instead of preparing people for doom and explaining why now you are going to
Slavery, yes, exile.
Exile, but then we have the pattern from slaves to kings to slaves. Now we have the slaves that will be restored, hopefully, if they follow the requirements of the covenant. And now we see also a different nuance or theological lens of history with the book of Chronicles. Because in the book of Kings, you have this sense that if your fathers did wrong, then you're going to reap the consequences. But now in Chronicles, it's different. In Chronicles, we have what is called this retribution theology.
Okay.
So it's immediate.
So if you do well, immediately you receive the benefits.
That's right. If you do wrong, then you're going to receive the consequences.
Okay.
So it's different from the view that we had before with people having trouble or having consequences because the earlier kings, they did wrong, Manasseh and the ones before, and now, but even the prophets, even Hezekiah, Ezekiel is challenging that view. So we shouldn't conclude that it's just this the biblical view. But in fact, we have this immediate retribution even in key verses that we don't find in the books of Samuel and the books of Kings.
Okay.
For example, that beautiful verse in 2 Chronicles 7:14 that says, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land." So we have hope. That's not entirely true that we are reaping the consequences of our fathers. We have hope, and the Lord, to this new people, this restored nation, is promising to have new life. It's promising that the fruits, the blessings of the covenant are going to be fulfilled in them. The children will be blessed, and they will be blessed now and not later.
Let's talk about the books of Ezra and Maya. We again find there the long lists of names. How are these long lists related to the message of the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah? And how are they related with the lists, the long list we find in the books of the book of Chronicles?
Well, now we have the book of Ezra and Nehemiah.
I imagine that that was going to happen.
It's also a unit.
Yes.
And it was a unit before. And we have these lists of people who participated. And it's like in a movie. At the end, you have the credits.
Okay.
The people who were there. Most of the times we just skip or we just delete them. But if you have a relative or somebody there, or your name is there, you want to listen to that. You want to look at that. And now, in the book of Chronicles, that connected with Adam, you see the connection with you and your family. The same with the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. It's like when you see in some churches or some places, they have the list of contributors.
Contributors, huh?
Yes, the one who helped this to happen. So we have this same way of preserving the memory and connecting. It's very human. It's connecting with the people who are present. And even though they deserve to go to exile, and you have lists of the people who went to exile, now you have lists of people who returned.
Interesting.
So you see these two ends of the same.
They're connected.
They're connected. And about the structure of Ezra and Nehemiah, we emphasize more than that it's a unit, because there's a chiasm with the two books.
Okay.
So the beginning of Ezra and the end of Nehemiah, they are together. As I said, apples and apples.
Okay.
Cherries and cherries. Oaks and oaks. You know, evergreens. You have the pine trees and so on. So you have the same with at the beginning of Ezra 1 to 11, the end of the Babylonian captivity, and at the end in Nehemiah 13, 1 to 31, the reforms of Nehemiah. And then you see building up the same themes at the two ends. And then at the center, you have the prayer of Nehemiah. So that's the climax. That's the top of the mountain.
That is the most important part for the author, I guess.
The restoration is central for the book. Esther 1 to 6 presents restoration of the temple, 1 to 6. Then Ezra 7 to 10 has the restoration of the community. Then Nehemiah 1 to 7 deals with the restoration of Jerusalem. And then 8 to 13 is the restoration of the covenant.
Wow. So everything is included. Everything is
beautiful, beautiful structure. And people, again, they don't have a grasp of the history of this period, as I mentioned earlier. And they have all mixed up, you know, the prophets, the names, and the kings. And many names look alike, or actually they are the same. And even Matthew, poor Matthew, you know, he got confused, you know, Zechariah. And people that have listened and read today, I see that they don't have quite the story straight. So let me go through the history for a few minutes. First, in 539, you have Cyrus conquering Babylon and has the edict for the Jews to return. However, even though Sheshbazzar returns with some people, they don't finish, because when Cambyses becomes the king, the works stop. And you have the Samaritans. This is similar. This is 539. This is not 457. So people get confused with Ezra and Nehemiah because the same happened almost 100 years later.
So there is like a repetition, apparent repetition.
Yes. And there's a gap between those two experiences. In 519, you have that Darius is now the king. And he allows the temple to be built. And many people say, oh, 457, that's when the temple was rebuilt. No, the temple for 516, it was already rebuilt in the time of Haggai
and Zechariah.
So you have that gap. And then during that time, it's fascinating because between Ezra 6:22 and Ezra 7:1, there's a gap of 60 years. And those 60 years, that's when Esther comes in. Because Xerxes, the Ahasuerus of the Bible, is the son of Darius. And this is when Malachi also performed his ministry. Then we jump from 486, from the time of Esther and so on. You go to Artaxerxes in 457. And he's the one who grants Jerusalem the status of political capital of Yehud. Yehud is the name of this province, this colony. That you have the name Jew, Yehudi, comes from Yehud. And this is similar to what happened in the New Testament. You have Caesarea was the political capital, Jerusalem, the religious capital. The same, Mizpah, since the time of the Babylonians, that had been the capital of the Pecha, of the governors. And now it's in 457, now that Jerusalem becomes the capital, and then after that is that the walls are rebuilt. And that's how we see that Yahweh is the King of Kings. Yahweh has restored his people.
Now we come to the last book of our series of these two programs, the book of Esther. This is a beautiful story. What can you tell us about the message of this book?
This is a wonderful way to finish. The book of Hadassah, a tree that flowers. Or Esther, Ishtar, the goddess of Mesopotamia. And here we have a book that has a love story. Not just a love story between two people. It's the love story of God. It's a story that anybody can relate, even little children. It was not kept with the other scrolls. This is part of the Ketuvim. This is part of the writings. And it's reserved for Purim, this festival. And even today, Jewish children, they will listen to the book of Esther. And every time that Haman is mentioned, they will sound, boo.
Okay.
And it's exciting how Purim is celebrated.
So it's a feast. It's just joy and
it's full of joy. And now they can understand it. You don't have the deep theology of the chronicler. You don't have the historical facts of the book of Kings, and you don't have the grotesque descriptions of the book of Judges. But we have irony, and they're hiding. Everything is hidden. Even the name of God is hidden. He's not mentioned even once, the name of God. But now, among all these carefully crafted literary piece, wonderfully done, aesthetically it's wonderful, we see these coincidences. We call it providence. And you see, for example, how everything is hidden. Haman hides the identity of the people he wants to destroy. Then we have Esther, who hid her Jewish identity. Then you have the king, who hides the identity of the ones he wants to honor. Mordecai, he hides that he's a relative of Esther. And Esther hides her intention for the banquet. So it's fascinating how it's crafted.
So it's a very intriguing plot.
Yes, it's a very intriguing plot. And then you have the twist and irony. You have Haman thinks that he's going to be honored. Then you have Mordecai, who refuses to honor Haman, and Haman has to honor Mordecai. And that Haman is impaled or hung on the stake that he had prepared for Mordecai. Irony.
So irony, and not only irony, also big reversals.
Yes, and a sense of humor. Because you see the touches of humor and the play on words that are in Hebrew, that in Spanish or English, we cannot really flavor them and enjoy them. But in Hebrew, it's a rich book, like the ears of Haman. Those are cookies that are eaten in Purim. So the significance is that humans never have all the information, but God is in control. He shows us how much to reveal and how he will do it. The message of hope, redemption, and restoration is consistent in the book of Esther. Even those who had been cursed, now they are blessed.
So God is in control even though he's hidden, right?
Today, when so many people are troubled by the future, they see economic woes, sickness, difficulties, marital problems, problems with their children. Today, among all this mystery, hidden there's hope. God is always in control. He let us know that even though many things will happen around us, he always will restore us and give us eternal life.